Hello and welcome to the new episode of Access Up Space Defense and Security Podcast. Today we'll be actually dissecting the topic related to marketing, communications, and a bit of dash into the journalism as well. Because I believe we have covered independently the marketing aspects of the space industry, but not really taking a sneak peek into the journalism side as well dedicatedly. So today's topic is independent space journalism and making way for communicators in the Indian space industry with Ayushee Chaudhary. Hi Ayushee, welcome to the
Hi,
podcast.
Omkar. Thank you so much. So glad to be here and finally having this chat with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, finally, it's great to record a podcast with you because I think we have been trying to go back and forth for quite
For
a month now.
yes,
But yeah, finally, I'm glad that we have coordinated this meet and recording this podcast.
yes,
So yeah, before we take a deep dive into this topic, because we have been knowing each other for long now, and I know that you have came from aerospace and defense to the space industry. Can you
yeah,
briefly tell us about yourself? What is your journey? How did you end up doing what you're doing at the moment?
right. So I'm very excited to be talking about journalism and communication, especially with a fellow friend who understands how this whole industry works. But talking about my journey, I started journalism. I've been doing journalism for about 8+ years now. And I was covering different fields, but I was somebody who was always very curious about aircrafts and space. But space was always like the secret fascination because I was like, I've not done engineering, so maybe there's no way in getting into it. And even in journalism, even if when I studied journalism, nobody really told like space is a niche or aerospace can be a niche that you can pick up. Maximum people would still talk about science and tech and defense. Also, we were still starting to understand that as a niche. Fortunately, 2019 there was Aero India happening here in Bangalore in India, and a media house was looking for some freelance journalists, and me just being curious because I wanted to know what Aero India is. I knew there would be aircraft, so I went there to cover that event. Those were 3 hectic days because morning to evening I was going around trying to cover the exhibition, talking to exhibitors there, also attending sessions, and then filing reports the same day because we were having everyday newsletters. So those were intense 3 days there, but I loved it. It was like a wonderland for me because I had aircrafts all around, people talking just about that. So I think that is where I would say that was a little turning point in my life because I had an exposure to the aerospace industry and I knew I loved this subject. So I entered into it. And ever since then, I didn't leave it. I covered aviation, defense, and a bit of space. The thing was that this was not a mainstream journalism in a way that, one, the subject was very niche. Two, the media house that I was writing for was not a mainstream publication, not a mainstream newspaper. So it was more focused on the industry, on the policy stakeholders. So the stories were done keeping those in mind and not so much just to reach out to the public. But I think that gave me a good exposure to research and understand these subjects. And then with space, I started to do my own. Anytime there was something happening, like the first cover story I did for the magazine was when the black hole image had come, and that was a huge breakthrough that humans captured a black hole image. And I got to do that, and through that I got to interact with the scientists at the National Science Foundation who had worked on these projects. I think for me that was a very exciting moment, that not just I'm getting to know something like this has happened, but I'm getting to interact with people and understand how these things are working, and then translate that into a simpler language, a simpler story, to let readers understand why this is such a big deal, why this is important, and more than that, what's the entire process behind this whole thing. So that was my drive, where I wanted to start talking more about space. The little concern was that back in even 4 years, 5 years back till 2019, 2020, space coverage was very limited in the media in India. At least a broader understanding was, I might invite some comments on this from people, but honestly, if there's no launch happening, there's nothing happening in the space industry. You go to a publisher and they want it has to be huge. A launch has to happen and a rocket needs to go up. Only then we will write a story. Otherwise, why do you want to cover space? What's happening there? So it was a bit of challenge to convince people sometimes that no, there's a lot more in space. Yes, of course, rockets have to be launched, but there's so much more. And so I started to just venture into it on my own independently. And 2021 onwards, I started to just write some stories here and there on my own blogs. Then I started to create content online, small videos, educative, informative videos. Through that, I got invited to some colleges, some workshops where they asked me to do a small talk on the kind of careers in aerospace, on space economy. I did a small executive course on master in space economy to understand better about the industry. And I think that really gave me a confidence to start talking more about it. And what I realized is that students also know about space, but they don't know there's a whole industry in space that's coming up. So that's how I got into it. And 2021, we started having one of these initial events in India when it comes to space events. So, your Indian Space Congress, Indian Space Conclave, these were having their first editions, and I went there. We didn't have a lot of media people there. We had still limited gatherings of the industry folks as well. So, I think that is what worked well for me because I went there. Yes, I was very intimidated. I was very hesitant because I'm like, this is going to be a group of all technical, academic people gathered there talking about space because you have that image about the space industry. But fortunately, when I went there and I started to interact with people, yes, there are all kinds of people, but I had fairly good interaction and people were open to me just being there as an enthusiastic person wanting to understand what's happening in the industry and write about that. So that gave me good networking and I started to go to more of these events independently. Of course, it takes a little bit of a hit on your pocket because when you're doing all of this independently, but it gave me a really good exposure to understanding the industry and allowed me to make really good connects and hence understand the kind of opportunities there are or the gaps there are for people who are coming from the communications background to be there in the industry. So yeah, that's what my story has sort of been, finding my space in the space sector through communications, making content, taking these workshops, doing these projects with Indian Space Association in space, so things like that.
Absolutely. I think I can very well relate to you when you mention about the fact that the coverage was really less back in those days because I was also working on ground as a journalist back then. And yeah, it was nothing short of horrible, I would say, back
Yeah.
then. Like if you wanted to get your article published uh, in any publication, people were not so, enthusiastic. They used to feel like this is something fictional, that will never happen,
Yeah.
basically. And I still remember Dhruva Space was one of the first companies at
First
that time
companies.
who had, like, I have really seen them starting from the bottom and now,
Yeah.
reaching this level. I really
Yeah.
admire the way the founders have scaled that company.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, I have seen their journey as well. And I know, at that time, the situation was not really that great. People are not
Yeah.
so, I would say,
Yeah.
keen towards the space in
And
general.
even in general, that's what, like, it's either just curiosity, so there's just wonder around it. But when it comes to covering it, people don't get it. At least now things are changing, yes. But 4 years
Yeah.
back, no, you want to tell them you want to cover, it's like some fictional thing, like you said. And since you
Yeah.
mentioned Dhruva, so yeah, I think because they've been there for quite some time now. They're one of the first space startups in India. Their journey
Yes.
has been something that they've evolved, and where we have seen that shift, that they are also one of that company in India who has a dedicated team for communications and
Yes.
marketing, and they also do that. So that is something, again, when it comes to private sector in India, the kind of marketing they want to do, or the kind of communications that needs to happen is a whole journey that is still somewhere evolving, still needs to be talked about. And the startups also still need to understand why it's important, why it's not. And space agency
Yes.
itself. So, yeah, like that whole understanding of why this is important to cover is, yeah, we are still getting there.
Absolutely, yeah, I agree with you. I think we are going to deep dive a much more into this topic.
Yeah, I was
More
trying
on
to
this
control
aspect,
there.
yeah, yeah. I think more on this topic as well, how the journalist treatments and everything, because I personally still feel there is still a long way to go when it
Yeah.
comes to the non-technical people, especially the marketing
Hmm.
journalist. Than I think not sales side so much, but people forget to realize this fact that marketing communication is very important to
Yeah.
basically not only to do sale. I mean, you can do a one-off sale of anything, but to retain the customer,
Retain.
it is very much important that you
Important.
have your marketing and the communication outreach in a right way and a consistent manner. Marketing
Consistent
is
manner.
not something, or journalism not something you do it one off, one time investment. No, it has to be consistent for years, then only you start seeing the
Yes.
result. So yeah, we'll come to
Exactly.
that point. I'm getting to that point now. So yeah, beginning with the the very basic question: what has it been like to be an independent space journalist in the Indian space ecosystem primarily, and how did you find your way into the industry? Starting from you shifted from aerospace
Right.
defense you mentioned, but in
Yeah.
general, can you tell me like
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
it has been like as an independent space journalist in India?
Um, See, finding my way into the industry was majorly through events. So I do have like a little inclination, a little soft corner towards events that started to happen because they opened a little bit of a gate, a doorway for people to enter and interact with these people who were otherwise really behind those walls when it comes to the space sector. And you didn't have an access to them. So I think how I found my way into it was really through these events and interactions. But it's been a mixed bag being an independent space journalist in India because, or even in general, I think that's the thing. But because India is more of a market that is, ISRO has been there, but as an industry, as an ecosystem, we have only started to develop a couple of years back prominently. We had private companies as well who were part of the ecosystem, contributing to ISRO's. But being out there after the private sector space reforms is when we really started to acknowledge and see that, okay, there's an ecosystem we want to create in India for the space sector beyond ISRO as well. So now what that does is it opens opportunities, yes, but when you are independently entering this ecosystem, coming from a background which is not your conventional technical academic background, people have some inhibitions because the sector has always been looked at as a very, very, and it is a very technical industry. You have to understand the tech behind it, but that's one major aspect of it, but that's still one aspect of it. There is more to this industry. There is more to beyond the engineers. And yes, engineers and all our technicians are very important to create anything that we are trying to build in the space ecosystem. But how is that being built? What are these advantages? Why do we need more of these things to happen? What kind of policies do we need to facilitate our engineers and technicians have a better ecosystem? All of these are the things where you have to bring in people from other industries as well, like your lawyers, your policymakers, your communicators, marketers, because they understand, they bring in a new perspective. See, maybe sometimes an engineer is trying to build a technology from a very tech perspective, which might be great. But does the ecosystem support and facilitate all of these things? Do we have the right policies in place or not? If we do this, how do we convince, say, your investors or any other stakeholders and decision makers to tell them why this technology is important for them and why we are not doing it just because we are very excited for this technology and it's great, but it might actually help you? So that is where you need more people to come in. And also, when it comes to the market, as a journalist you have a little bit of an understanding of how the market works because as a field you research, you write, you look at things from a multi perspective way. So to bring in that kind of aspect is something which is also crucial, that as a journalist, as a communicator, you can bring in, and that helps a company to understand how to advance their business. But what happens is that while for me personally, it's the journey has been Good in the sense that I found, I think, the right set of people, because I started to go to these events at a very, very nascent stage when these events were still beginning to start, and everybody was still understanding what do we do at these events, how do we figure this out, how can this help. So it allowed me to really make these good connections with people and make them understand my point of view, and for me to understand the industry's evolution as well. And I think what worked for me was people understood I'm not looking for the next breaking headline tomorrow. Like today, I'm standing having a talk with them, and I don't need like breaking news tomorrow, and I'm not going to flash that somewhere, because otherwise people get skeptical about what do they share or not. So I think that way it was a two-way street, where I was also very sure that I am not looking for that next breaking headline, because I'm not looking for that kind of a short term goal here, that I get that one huge breaking news and then it dies down or fades away. I really wanted to understand how the industry is working and what's happening here, what's with the startups, what's with the policymakers, and how are we creating this ecosystem. So it was good in that way that I found good people. I got to know about the opportunities. But it's also challenging because people will tell you about the opportunities, but they're still kind of warming up to having people from communications background take up major
Yes.
roles and be paid that much for that.
Yeah.
Because, see, the money is coming in the industry slowly with investments and everything, but that still has to go more to the technicians, engineers, and it's a very risk intensive, capital, very, very capital extensive industry. So they would, now people do want to do these projects, people want to do marketing, people want to do communications, but they are still skeptical about, do they really want to pay that much. So,
Yeah.
sustaining yourself monetarily, just if you're focused on the space industry, has been a bit of a challenge, I wouldn't say, because all of these events, there's travel and everything, and you're investing on your own. You have to figure out ways of finding the right partners, collaborators, sponsors who, understand that you going there can also be something that you can do for them. So, making them understand that and get monetary support becomes a bit of a struggle sometimes, because not everybody still understands that and we are still getting there. So that's been challenging. But I
Yes.
think for me, because I was able to find the right kind of people through the networking I did and through the events I went to, and then
Yes.
people introduced me to other people, it did open up the opportunities for me. But yeah, to sustain independently, it is still something that you have to really work your way around, and you'll have to look for additional things to have on your plate to sustain.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree with you on this aspect. I think the events thing that you mentioned, for me as well, initially, because I've been coming from a science background primarily and then shifted to business communication. So I could relate to it how events and conferences basically help you in those initial days where you're trying to network with the people. And that's the thing, unfortunately there have been like conferences which call themselves as students, but really they, it is unfortunate that the events which are meant for actual business do not charge any entry fee, and
Yeah,
the conferences which are meant for students are
students.
charging like loads of money, but yeah,
Yeah,
anyways, at least those events are at least free, which are meant for the actual
yeah,
business, that you
yeah.
can actually network with the people. And yeah,
See,
proceeding, yeah, yeah, proceed, yeah, yeah, proceed, at
no,
least.
no, we'll go. No, I was just saying that's another thing, that events are a good getaway into it.
Yes.
But like you said, now what's happening is that the events are also now so many. Maybe we'll come back to that also. That's another thing, that when you have so many events and then the accessibility to it, especially
Yes.
to students, what's the point if you want to have a student conference but keep like hundreds and hundreds of euros and dollars for them to attend that?
Absolutely. Yeah,
So, but
I
yeah,
agree
we'll
with you.
come
Yeah.
back to that events. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, proceeding ahead, I think we are reaching up to this point now. So, how do unpaid opportunities impact the ability of independent journalists and marketers to sustain themselves in the industry? because I believe they also have a lot of stories to tell, and you can't tell the stories for free. You have to invest some resources into it. And how does this expectation of free labor in space journalism and marketing affect the overall quality and diversity of narratives coming out of the sector? I mean, I personally have an opinion as well that I always openly speak about everywhere, whether it's LinkedIn, whether I meet people in person, or whether it's any kind of conferences or events. But yeah, it would be great to have your perspective as well, because you have been consistently working in the Indian space industry on ground, which I
Yeah.
haven't been doing since past 8 years now. I'm not on the ground, so it would be great if you can provide us an insight into this complete
Right.
area.
Um, okay, that's very interesting and a very personal topic. Of course, I think we can go on and rant about it quite a bit, but
Absolutely.
I'll try to refrain the rant. But
Yeah.
see, unpaid opportunities, of course, impact your work. It impacts the quality. It impacts if you want to have diverse perspectives about the industry. If you really want the ecosystem to grow, you need diverse perspectives. And if unpaid opportunities will keep coming, then after a point, it's difficult for me to take those unpaid opportunities to sustain. And then what happens is, if you don't allow more of these independent creators or journalists or communicators to come in and express their views, then you're creating an echo chamber where those similar kind of perspectives will keep going around. And it's then like there's an image that you've created and you only want to create and display that image, and it doesn't allow,
Yes.
I feel, a holistic kind of a perspective about the industry or the sector, then, which might work for the initial hype, but it's not going to help anybody in the long run if we really want to create an ecosystem that's sustainable in the long run. And see, initially I would take these projects, and I've done, and I do not encourage that, but people expect if you do that once, because initially I did those things because I thought that it's a learning opportunity for me, because I felt I'm coming from an industry where, which is not, I'm not part of the ecosystem, and I'm getting my entry into it. Now things are
Yeah.
different, but 3 years 4 years back also, it was not so easy to make your way into these conversations where people from the industry are discussing about things. So for me, I think at that time I just looked at it from a point of view of learning, and to get myself there at those decision and at those discussion forums, and get a better understanding. So
Yes.
initially I have taken those, but then what tends to happen is, then people expect that you will still do it either for free, or they would want to pay you very less, saying things like, the industry is such, we don't have that much of the investments right now, we don't have that much of money. But see, it becomes very difficult for me also to sustain, no. If initially maybe I will take those opportunities because I want to learn, but then
Yeah.
after a couple of years I also want to implement that learning, I also want to grow, and I can see the industry is
Mm.
growing. So I think unpaid work doesn't help anybody, and it's become like, if
I
you're
agree.
not from the technical field, then it does happen. Again, I don't want to generalize, but it's also the truth, I can't hide it, that if you're not
Yeah.
from the technical industry, then you will be like looked at slightly skeptically, you will be scrutinized more as to how much you really know the industry, and they
Yeah.
really want to know that if they're investing this much of money in this project with you, what's the ROI right there. And they would want कि it's just अरे थोड़ा सा story बताना है, थोड़ा सा marketing है, why can't, you just do it for us, and it will help you also for your content, it will help you also. So they want to do that kind of a barter here. But that slight shift is coming, but we still have a long way to go there. And
Yes.
like I said, unpaid work is something that should not be appreciated or encouraged, because whatever it is, even if it's a small platform or a big media house, any perspective that is going out right now about you adds to the industry's marketing as well. And that
Yeah.
needs to be encouraged, and it needs to be understood that if somebody is talking, even if it's a story, it takes a lot of research in the background. I could just write a story. Yes, people now also think there's AI coming in and this and that, but there's a difference in what an AI will write for you and what somebody who has been in the industry, who has interacted, who has seen the events evolve, can write for you. Even when you're telling a story about a company or an industry, a
Yes.
person writing it will have a difference in how it can be connected with more people, the kind of audience you are looking at, and accordingly do that. So I think unpaid and free labor when it comes to content any kinds should not be encouraged, and even the industry needs to start understanding that. And they'll pay a lot for if a certain media house has been established and then they want your advertisements there, you'll end up paying that if you want a story there. So I
Yes.
understand that established platforms that you want to put your story there, so you are willing to pay. But even a small part of that, if you have to pay to an independent person who's creating content independently, more dedicatedly for the sector, you'll have your doubts about it, which I think should not be
Yes.
the case, especially given where the industry right now is. Right now, they should be open to all different perspectives that people are bringing, be encouraging towards talking to them, sharing some information. We are not telling you to share your
Yes.
confidential data, but just some information about what you are doing, not just once the launch has happened and you create a hero narrative there. No, just the entire story needs to happen. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think it becomes challenging to sustain monetarily at times and manage all the events and everything yourselves. But otherwise, networking has been good for me here, and people have been
Yeah.
helpful in that sense in making me connect with better people and telling me about opportunities. But that I know is happening with
Yes.
me because I've built those connections over the years. Somebody who walks in new will
Hmm.
not have that, because people still have a little skepticism about independently spending so much for independent creators.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. So, I mean, like, just on the same path, I would say, continuing on the same questions, I would say this is an extended part of the previous question. What are some of the most common excuses companies and agencies give for not paying independent creators? And how do we dismantle this justification? I mean, for example, the way you mentioned, for established publications, I don't get, when I tell people that I can bring you sales, like a guaranteed leads where I will introduce you to the companies, and I charge them one fourth of the amount that they end up paying for sponsorship. I tell them directly,
Hmm.
you end up paying 50,000 euros for a 3-day conference. I will do a sale for you, a guaranteed sale for you at one
Yeah.
fourth of that cost. So I don't know whether they don't get the mathematics or not, but it is very easy when you tell this thing to a person from aviation, defense, or any other, they quickly get the mathematics. I don't know, space industry being such a technically high level, they still don't know the mathematics or finances very well. But yeah, please tell
Yeah.
your thoughts on this.
So yeah, see, that's true. That happens. I wouldn't say that doesn't happen, and I think we only realize that's something not just in India but even globally that is the case. It's difficult for people to believe that you could translate sales for them. And while it's a very risk intensive industry, I think all their risk appetite is so invested in just
Yeah.
the technical aspect that they just, I don't think, have much risk appetite left to explore with independent people and marketing. And so I think
Yes.
they're not so willing to go ahead with independent people sometimes, because
Yes.
I don't know, there is some sort of, what I have encountered is, one, the excuse, since you asked,
Yeah.
see, a lot of times the most common one is that we are a startup, we have limited resources, we have limited money, and we would want to rather put it in the tech part of it than invest so much in marketing and communications. Other discussion points have been that if I am taking or hiring somebody who is just for communications in my team, and I am only starting as a company, I do not have that much of right now content or need to constantly put something out there. So maybe I don't need somebody dedicatedly just for that. And I would look for somebody who can do marketing communications for me, but also some other skills is what I think they try to gauge at. So the money, the skills, and another thing I think is the whole how do I put it? So there is this image about, of course, and we understand that space is a sector much like defense. There are a lot of confidential matters, and there's a lot of confidential data which can be very sensitive if it's just out there in a way or not handled appropriately. So I think they have that a little bit of fear of how the information might get handled. Plus, right now, with so many startups and so many companies coming in, we are being collaborative, but I think there is that little bit of a, of course, competition where they fear that, this is about my company, and what if this information goes out to the other one, and XYZ gets to know about what I am doing, what this one is doing. So that kind of thought process still exists. And if you're not from the technical background, then they are not sure if you will understand their tech and be able to talk about it further. So these are the things. And I think since you mentioned about defense and aviation, there, of course, this is different because I've myself worked with defense and aviation industry as well, and they are very strong on marketing and PR, aviation industry especially. But I think what happens is maybe for them, they are now a little bit more established, and space industry is still reaching there, getting established there. And I think Elon Musk can go and say things, and he's not afraid of what he puts out there. It won't affect. He has established his technology. He has done his marketing, so he'll go and say things. But that kind of, I'm not saying you have to be that person and tweet things like he is doing, but a little more openness of sharing things, telling your stories, looking at things beyond tech. That is still yet to come in. And maybe that's because, like I said, that we are at a nascent stage. People are just beginning to have investments and they are still growing. So I
Yes.
don't think they are very open right now, and they are still a little doubtful of whether or not how much they want to invest when it comes to marketing and communications. And what I try to tell them there is that, see, you need to understand that at least I do get it sometimes somebody who's right away new, they're not sure. But if somebody has worked in the industry, I've seen how the industry evolves. I understand the sensitivity of the topics. And I also understand that marketing is not just about putting out things on social media and reaching out to the public. That's one aspect of it. But when I'm talking about communications to you, when I'm talking about marketing to you, there are various aspects of it. Digital is just one aspect of it, which you cannot ignore nowadays. But there are more aspects to it. Just when it comes to your business, how do you
Yes.
pitch it, how do you maintain relations, and a communications person will bring that to the table as well. He or she who has been at least experienced is asking for a certain sum because they come with that background where they can also help you with market research, they can also help you with building connections, they can also help you in sustaining those connections. Because right now, even whether it's investments or anything, yes, we are creating technology and that sells and you pitch that, but a lot of this industry is still about relations and networking, and how well do you know people and how well are you connected. So I think
Yes.
those are the things that is also something we can bring on the table. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's mix of those things, the money, the skills. We also need to upskill ourselves, and I have tried to do that because I understand that tech will get a priority in this industry, and that's okay. And I'm not saying you invest less in the tech, but if you have a person, maybe say events now, there are hundreds of events happening now. I mean, you were talking to Remco, and Space Agenda has listed like what 300 events already this year. India itself has like, we started with three events in one year, I think 4 years back, and now we are. I had three events just last month in India. So after a point, it's becoming a lot for everybody to be there. And last year we were discussing it's reaching that event fatigue all of us are having, because how much can you talk if it's the same set of people and the similar discussions? So there again, do you go just for not missing out and putting out a picture and just create like a photo opportunity, and just is that ROI enough for you as a company or not? There again, I feel if you have a communications person, it can differ.
Yes.
And you can, you don't have to invest the time and energy of your technical people, but how do you navigate so many events and try to bring some ROI from there, which might not be immediate. You'll have to be patient for that as well. But over
Yes.
some time, those that kind of consistent communication with the stakeholders, with the public, will help create a brand identity in some time, which will bring its own ROI.
Absolutely. Yeah, I have this thought, on the things that you mentioned, especially about, the technical aspect of the industry. It is great. I mean, you have a great product, everything is fine. But if you really see the track record of the industry in the past few years, it's not only in India, by the way, I'm not talking in the context of India, I'm
Yes,
talking in
yes.
global context. We see that only the American space industry is really of some value to the government, but it's not really the case when it comes to the European region or the Indian region or any other place, on this planet. The reason is because I think the relation between the government and the private sector is very consistent.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the American companies are able to go global. I mean, even the SpaceX, the way they have disrupted the market, like, we spoke about this in the previous podcast. I think before you there was one of the senior expert, Pierre Leone, with whom we recorded the podcast. I mentioned this in that as well. uh, the way SpaceX has disrupted years long established players like SES, Eutelsat. I
Yeah.
mean, these players have been existing in the market for past 30 plus years.
Yeah.
SpaceX came in, just it's not even 10 years since they
10.
rolled out the
Yeah.
Starlink,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they have absolutely disrupted the market. The reason here is, the one of the prime reason here is the ease of the consumer when it comes to the
Yeah.
tech part. And I think the communication, like, I know Elon Musk doesn't really have PR and marketing team as such, because he himself
Yeah.
is a communicator through the
Yeah.
X.
Yeah.
But of course, you can't every not every founder of the space company can be an influencer like this, and that's the reason you need to have the marketing channel. But what they
Yeah.
fail to realize is that even though SpaceX doesn't have a PR and marketing, the one person who is the face of the company is clearly communicating what needs to be
Yeah.
communicated.
Yeah.
And that's where the most of the space companies are failing, that you are not able to communicate. I mean, there are hundreds of space companies whose website when I open, I don't get a damn thing about what they're actually trying to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a simple, when you open a home page, you should get to know what the company is
Company
then and
is.
there
Yeah.
itself. And I think it's not only about marketing, it's about the web development, it's about the graphics, it's about
Absolutely.
journalism, it's about the communication, and then it's about the complete marketing aspect. So the whole
Yeah. Yeah.
package is missing highly in the space industry. I think the moment this is prioritized very well, then we can see some of the revenues that might be climbing in the downstream market. Like, for example, if
Yeah.
there's a
Yeah.
satellite operator trying to sell their services in the downstream market, for that you need a communication, because when you're trying to sell your satellite imagery customer is not in the space industry.
Space
They are
industry.
in
Yeah.
maritime, they are in aviation. Those are the markets where things are very generalized.
Generalized. Yeah.
You can't go in the maritime sector and tell people what kind of satellite technology you have. They are not going to give a damn about what satellite technology you have. They are going to give a damn only about what kind of insights your imagery is
Insights. Yeah.
providing to them.
Them. Yeah. Yeah.
So you need to communicate that with them, but this is not the communication that is going through. And what I see in India is a lot of founders, they are just trying to hammer out their journey. That's, I think, a story can sell for a while, but a
Yeah,
good communication about the product will mint money for ages. That's what the ecosystem is failing to understand at the moment.
yeah, yeah.
Like
And
you can
because that,
sell the products core for generations, but you can't keep on selling the person's story for continuously and try expect sales out of that. You're, instead
right.
of that they become an influencer. Why are you even running a space company? So that's the difference I'm not getting, because a
Yeah,
founder is meant to communicate about their product very well, not to go out and hammer your journey 24/7
right,
over there.
right, right. Yeah, like, see, telling that journey is sometimes, I'm not, see, I won't say that it's absolutely irrelevant. You should tell about your story because, yes, people will connect, they'll understand where you're coming from. But yeah, what is happening is that, are you deviate, like, is the focus remaining just that journey? Because then that journey, once or twice, like you said, couple of times, it's good to know and it's encouraging for people. But is it enough? Like, you are encouraging some people and students, telling where you started from and how have you reached. It's great, it's inspiring, but after that, what
Yes.
kind of product did you develop? Because ultimately these founders have also reached a stage because they created some product which the market maybe needed. So it's the product that they need to talk about more, and how the journey of that product has been. And any of these products that are being developed are not short term products, because our industry is not such that has like a quick gestation period. It's a
Yes.
long gestation period industry. So any product that is being worked upon, or even being ideated today, will need a long term impact, and its implementation journey is long, everything is long. So that product needs to stay with people,
Yes.
that product needs to stay with the stakeholders to remember why that product is something they would want to invest in. And I don't
Absolutely.
mean just investment in terms of the investors, but like you also mentioned, whether it's maritime, whether it's other decision makers, for them to understand why should they have this product, why should this satellite is something they would want to invest in, or why is the
Yes.
data that X company has generated is something they
Yeah.
want to purchase from them and interact with them for that. So those kind of things is where we do have gaps. And
Absolutely.
I think that needs to be addressed, because it's good to, like I said, it's good to have hero narratives once or twice,
Yes.
but we don't need just poster boys, poster girls,
Yes.
poster, like, it's good, but like, we do it once or twice. After that, we need to go beyond that
Absolutely. Yeah.
and start showing what the product can do for you. And especially given now that we have so many of Indian space startups
Yes.
coming in, we need to start limiting that thing and talk more about the applications of that product. Which is, again,
Yes.
even in terms of events, when I see, I think what needs to happen is, which might be happening slightly but still needs to change, the generic events for space. I don't think we need like too many numbers, like every month having the same kind of, every 2 months having the same kind of event with similar set of people discussing the same things. I don't think that is going to help much, because then after a point it's just becoming an investment for the companies to go there,
Yes.
reach a place, spend time and money in talking there about the same thing.
Yes.
So even events need that kind of shift where they start being more specific, because space industry in itself is very huge as a subject in generic. But
Absolutely.
like defense space is something we have started in India. We have these def space events now. So where it's just
Yes.
focused around defense and space. So we have limited that. Similarly, I think maybe in terms of upstream, downstream, maybe we could have. We recently had
Yes.
one event which just talked about satellite applications, and it was a very restrictive 1 day event.
Yes.
I think those are the kind of, we need to also streamline what kind of events do we need, because I think we are over that phase where we just need one picture of panelists sitting or one speaker on the podium and dais and telling, I attended this event and this is what happened. I
Yes.
think we've had enough of that in the 3 years, and now it needs to start go beyond those discussions as to what discussions came out of this and what is the next step that can happen. And we need to
Yes.
streamline that these events bring some concrete discussions out of at the end of them, and not just become like get-togethers that we are going to because we have to.
Yes. Absolutely. I think, yeah, that is very important. I think the kind of segmentation that you need to have in the events, because I think networking, if done in a productive way, can change the face of the industry if it is done in the right way, of
Right.
course. Otherwise, it just becomes a, kind of an addition to the portfolio. Okay, we just attended that event and you met people, you promote it on social media, that's it.
And it
So yeah,
becomes
but
an
I think
investment. You're just
yes, yes,
spending money if you're not being able to generate anything out of it, and
yeah.
just doing it because you have to do it.
I think it's not only the issue with the space industry, but I see a lot of companies outside the space industry as well. I don't want to name the companies, but when I see at the quick commerce and everything, people are, I think this generation is getting used to burn the VC money and then file for bankruptcy and then possibly, start something else. There is a reason why quick commerce has failed in United States, because it was not sustainable.
Yeah.
And in India we see it's taking up, but on the back end people don't know what is the scene, how things are
Yeah.
burning in terms of
Burning.
money. And I think it's the same thing, it is there in the space industry. If one day it starts tumbling down, it will basically take down everyone with it.
Everyone. Yeah.
And I think that's
That's
the scene we don't
another
want in the
we
industry.
don't want. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I think, like, I don't know, I personally, it's great that we have so many companies and I've interacted with most of
Yes.
them, but I'm not. And I do understand that this is also a nature of any industry. When the industry is developing, you have a lot of companies that will come in, and that create some kind of a good competition, and then maybe collaborations and mergers happen, and then eventually the segregation happens, and not everybody will be able to sustain. But that's what, like, I don't get too excited when we get to know that we have like 200 plus 300 plus startups. It's a good thing that the industry is expanding, but we need to have a little bit of a streamlined approach also here, because the nature of this industry is very unique. So
Yes.
while it's great that we are expanding in terms of players, we also need to see that is what kind of innovation is coming in, what kind of new tech or new application that these companies are bringing in on the table. And
Yes.
then, because a few of them, especially the ones that have been there a little from the beginning, really need to succeed, only then the entire industry will be able to build on that.
Yes. Absolutely. I agree with that fact. Absolutely.
And even there, I think that thing with investors, now I think what's also happening is investors coming in and giving in the money. They want the founders to be out there, they want the company to be out there marketing themselves.
Yes.
But again, there, that is where I feel that that doesn't need to mean that you just go all out there and there's just like your story constantly going in. There are ways to create your brand, and I'm sure
Absolutely.
what the investors are also looking at, you creating that brand, and not just short term photo opportunities or short term stories out there. Stories are important, those photo opportunities are important, but you need to see beyond that and create a long term strategy for communications as well, that creates your brand value and stays with people. And I'm sure that is
Yes.
something even the investors are looking for, which I don't think everybody is getting right now in the industry. And we'll
Absolutely.
need to work around
No,
that. Yeah.
definitely, I agree with you on this fact. So I think, yeah, we have finished the part one of the episode
Oh, yeah.
in this, and we'll be continuing the part two in the next part of the episode. So
Yeah.
stay tuned.